I'm going to take it into the emotional and behavioral component of money. I'll use myself as an example. In my corporate job, when I was miserable, I went to happy hour a lot. I was drowning my sorrows because I was just trying to shut it off. Kind of like the unhappiness tax.
Yo, Chris, man, what are you doing? What are you up to?
I'm just helping people reinvent their lives. No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. Well, I'm going to join in. Cool.
God bless, we're breaking these runs. Life too short to play on speed run.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about a topic today that every reinventor probably knows they have to address, but most do their best to try to manage it, probably with a bit of avoidance or even fantasy built in, which is why we're diving deep today on how to think about your financial runway during your career reinvention. Okay, now this is a fairly advanced topic with regards to reinventing your career. And I'm really glad that I'm sitting here with Chris, because Chris is a professional when it comes to mapping out finances, and he's done a really good job of this personally. And our pitch to you today is to heighten your awareness and think smartly about your finances from the very beginning. In this episode, we're going to help you develop an initial framework to assess your financial runway, because reinvention connotes change, right? And change doesn't happen overnight. And look, Chris, our goal with this podcast and our community and everything that we're doing is to help people build their next career chapter in ways that are leaps and bounds better than before, energy-wise, purpose-wise, and yes, money-wise. We want to fuel people to make a lot more money doing what they love than what they were doing before. That's the whole point of reinvention. So there is a lot of hope and promise when it comes to this notion of successfully reinventing your career and life. And it really is possible for every one of you to do that. We've seen that time and time again. But Chris, we've got to start by being sober and realistic about our finances, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And I think sky's the limit. And we really are excited for people who are reinventing their careers to make more money than they ever even dreamed of before doing something they love. I want them to do the work they love and have a more abundant, wealthy, exciting financial result from it. Mm-hmm. But I think it actually starts from a place of going through the sober approach and thinking rationally and thinking reasonably and even contemplating, some worst case scenario situations in a sense. And the reason is that if you do that, then it takes the fear, or for some people, there's sometimes almost like a panic around it. It takes that out of the equation because you actually go through the process of intelligently thinking about this part rather than either hoping it's just going to work out, or like you said before, people sometimes try to manage their financial runway with fantasy. I mean, listen, I'm a perfect example. My first year goal when I came out as a full-time entrepreneur was like $1 million. My second year goal was $25,000.
Exactly.
Because I was like, oh, okay. By the way, I still believe in my greatness and all that stuff and whatever, the same way I did going into that first year. But the calculation of all the skills that I had to learn and all the groundwork I had to do and how long that takes and figuring things out. And obviously we talk here about reinvention from the perspective of making it faster for people to execute their reinvention. So you're lucky if you're listening, you've got my experience to help you with that so that you can have a faster reinvention. And this is part of it.
And this is something that I've struggled with in my career, being an entrepreneur for 20 years, working in this world where there's been a lot of ups and downs. I've had to reinvent myself a lot of different times. And I'll say that the money piece is one by which you want to detach yourself from emotion and look at it with sobriety. It's really important just to be aware of where you're at now and just make a plan energetically about what you can actually do. It takes so much stress off the table when you're going to follow the advice that we're going to give you in this episode, because when you have financial stress, which is very real, okay, like financial stress is a real thing. It's one of the most painful things to experience. Most of us have experienced financial stress in our life. It's really painful. The quickest way to deal with financial stress is to turn towards it and look at what is actually happening, okay? Because when you're actually not looking at it and avoiding it, it's when that stress seems to spiral. And I'm talking from a lot of experience, okay, on this one. Let's turn towards it. Let's look at what the numbers are. And I love the framework that you're going to share with us today, right? Because having this framework is something that I wish I would have had, for all the times that I reinvented my career. And so I think we want to start there with how you frame out the most important numbers to be looking at as you're reinventing.
First thing I'll say is when I talked about my expectations being managed as I went into year 2 of being an entrepreneur, the only reason that 25K goal worked for me is because I had a really robust financial runway. I had a fairly high earning career for a long time, so that is a big help. But I also know many people who make as much money as I did or much more who are living paycheck to paycheck, essentially. We can get into that, but let's start with the very basics.
Actually, before you go in, I want to say one thing on that, because I think a lot of stuff when it comes to money, and I want to just reiterate what you just said and actually expand it a little bit, because I think there's a lot of comparison. We think we understand what other people are going through financially, and we have this perception of keeping up with the Joneses, right? And all this stuff. And, they make that much money and I make this much, and it makes us feel sometimes disappointed or less than. I'm going to tell you that as 20 years of being a coach and also coaching people that are really successful in a bunch of ways, you have no idea what's going on with other people. People could be making a lot of money, a lot of earning, but be in tremendous amount of debt and teetering on financial ruin. Okay. This is very common. Or conversely, there could be people and families that don't earn a lot of income, but have a lot of stability and have saved a lot of money or are doing really well. So we know this. But when you're in this process of reinvention, this is the time to put the blinders on, in a sense, okay, and turn towards yourself and your family and the areas that you need to look at personally and be very sober about these things you're about to share, which is looking at the 2 main numbers of reinvention. But I just want to share that because I think a lot of times we get so lost in the swirl of what I should be doing, what I want to be doing, or what others are doing, that we need to just stop. And I keep saying the word sober, but there is a sobriety element to this that can help reinvention happen faster.
All right, you took me to a place. I'm going to go on a tangent for a second.
Let's do it.
We're talking about numbers today, right? We're talking about finances. Man, it's so emotional though. There's so much emotion tied up in this concept for people, right? Especially in our society. There's so much comparison going on that everyone's experiencing. And a thing I've had to recast as I went from being a high earning corporate person who was miserable in his corporate job to at first a low earning entrepreneurial person who was loving what he was doing, but was like, show me the money. It's the way I felt about the work and the way I feel about the work I'm doing is very, very positive and exciting and energizing and amazing. But that comparison mind is something that has to be managed through this whole process because there's a lot of people I can look at. I mean, I live in the Upper East Side of New York City, right? There are rich, miserable people all around me, Todd. I'm surrounded by them, millions of them.
I'm in LA, brother, in Venice Beach. Same here.
Right? And not to say everybody around here is miserable, but the point being is that there are a lot of people who are doing the right thing and making gobs of money and jetting all over the place. But how does your soul feel? That's a whole other conversation we can have, right? But emotion is tied up in this. And that's why I'm going to take us to a really concrete starting place that I think to some people is going to sound really obvious, but it's not that obvious because there's only 2 numbers that you need to know. You need to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. Duh. Big revelation. Oh my God. How much is coming in and how much is going out? Here's the thing though. People are unclear about this. People don't know this. I mean, people don't know how much money is going out for sure, right? A lot of people are living to the paycheck number. So if you make $100,000, it's almost a presumption that roughly $100,000 is going out the door. I think the statistics will bear out that for most people, $120,000 are going out the door on an annual basis, right? So really simple concept, but it's not one that people are generally executing on. In what I've seen, and frankly, with some of the people that I talk to that I know and love intimately, don't have a grasp around these basics.
You know what's interesting about it is that it takes a little bit of work, which I've had to do this very thing of actually really being, again, sober around, well, how much money does come into me and how much money does come out. And when you build that system and you actually check in with it every month, I do it every month, right? Okay, here's how much is coming in and here's how much is going out. And I do this in partnership with my wife as well. And we just look at those numbers. It's very freeing. It actually sets the stage for you to be able to understand where you can go in your reinvention. It's really almost like internal error. Like they're not basing what can happen based on what's actually the reality right now. The call here is to understand those two basic numbers from a very, very personal structure standpoint. So that way you can be like, all right, what can I now do? And once you have that, I'll tell you that a lot of the stress starts to go away because now you're working within a system and an operation by which at least you know what's actually happening, right?
And I think, listen, with the people we work with in the reinvention community, right, we can ask these questions. We both have asked it of our one-on-one coaching clients, right? It's like, if you're going to try something new, you're going to reinvent your career, do something different. Ultimately, you get to, well, how much do you need to make for that to be viable? The number one answer is just what I make now. And yeah, we want full replacement income for everybody who does this. We want you to make more money than you make right now. But the truth is, that might not actually be what you need. That's why you got to know that number of what's going out the door, because there's psychological anchoring to, I make $300,000, I make $100,000, whatever your anchor is. That is an identity point. That is not necessarily a functional data point that you need to live your life, right? You don't need to spend to the level that you happen to make. There's an SNL skit that I feel like I'm getting really close to here, Todd, where it's like Chris Parnell is selling a book. It's called Don't Spend Money You Don't Have.
Yeah.
I think Steve Martin was the host, and he's like, now hold on a second. If I don't have the money, can I spend it? And Chris Parnell's like, no, you cannot. I don't want to get into that comedic
I want to actually
territory.
ask you about this a little bit, okay? Because for me, and you know me by now, right? And my clients know me and what I share on social media, it's very hopeful, very motivational, like this idea of reinvention. You can literally find a career path. Your next chapter can be so fulfilling from the standpoint of it can match your talents, it can match your interests and your passions, which we're fueling people to do that. And you can replace that income or you could make a lot more. And I've seen this happen. So there is a lot of that hope and that promise, but you're also coming in right now and saying, let's look at the numbers and actually start to break down what do you need right now? And I think this is really important for people that are starting the reinvention path, because while you want to live connected with the hope and connected with the dream, and you want to have that magnetic North Star as we talk about what can happen, you also have to realize that you're in a process of transformation. And that includes the transformation of how money flows to you and flows out of you. So the recommendation here, Chris, and I want you to get a little bit more into it, like in terms of how do you start to monitor and make decisions around, or even change that unconscious relationship you have with how much money you need to have, or that story you have, or how much you need to spend. What did you do? Because I know that you went through this. You had a really high earning career and then stopped. And did you start to make changes, like practically speaking, with how much money you were spending? Did you have to talk with your wife around it? I'm actually curious, like practically speaking, what you did.
Absolutely made some changes. First of all, I'm lucky in that my wife and I, like you talked about, we sit down every month and we know what the numbers are, right? And I think that puts us ahead of a lot of the game, to be honest. I think people need to commit to knowing what the numbers are. But when we started talking about doing this, we started talking about me doing this, right? It was really important to make a distinction between, well, what are the needed numbers? What are the necessary numbers? And what are the discretionary numbers? Because obviously the discretionary spend is the part that you truly can control. And there are levels to that. And I can do a whole technical breakdown on that stuff at some other time. But the point was, for me, and I'm going to take it into the emotional and behavioral component of money for a few minutes here. And I'll use myself as an example because, Todd, you say sober a lot in this conversation because it's about the mindset that we bring to it, but also literally, right? For me, in my corporate job, when I was miserable, I went to happy hour a lot. I was drowning my sorrows going to happy hour a lot. I was going out a lot, and just doesn't mean I can't socialize with people, but I was probably having a lot more drinks than I really needed to or wanted to because I was just trying to shut it off. That's kind of like the unhappiness tax is what I call the money that was going out the door for me to pay for the drinks at happy hour was like the unhappiness tax.
I love that.
Cool.
Unhappiness tax. What does that mean? It's like the money that you spend because you're unhappy, that is discretionary, that can be controlled. Yeah, okay. I love it.
Exactly. I mean, for me, everyone's got an unhappiness tax. I'm convinced of it, right? And I'm going to say this in a minute, but this was not a minute process. This was a, years type of process. For me, it was easy eventually to make the connection to say, hey, you know what? When I'm doing work that I love, that aligns with who I am, that is like my mission in life, as opposed to just doing this work for someone else, it was easy for me to say, oh, I want those hours back. Well, I want that money to invest in this reinvention. So I don't want to spend $1,000 a month and 20 hours a month at happy hour. I want that money to go towards my education, to upskill myself and my business. And I want that time to do all the work that Todd insists I do as we work back and forth and build on stuff. So it's like a double whammy, money and time that I could get back because I wasn't running away from the pain and the unhappiness of that setting that wasn't right for me.
Yeah, it's interesting how like being unhappy has a like monetary cost to it, and actually understanding how much money am I spending on these happy hours that I don't have to do, or if I start to get excited about my future in a different way. You got this notion of coaching years back. You're like, I want to help people leave corporate and start doing this. And you went to NYU and you got certified as a coach, and you're still in an executive coaching program at NYU, I believe, or maybe you finished it. But the point is that you started to invest your time and energy and money on things that were related to your reinvention. And that started to shift your financial flow, like less money on drinks, more money on other things, but it starts to kind of balance out the equation, I'm guessing, a little bit. But you feel more aligned with and excited about your future because you're not wasting time and you're not just like drowning in your sorrows.
Right. And listen, there is no judgment here. And that's exactly why I start with an example from my own life. That's a real example, right? Is because when we're in a tough situation or a stressful situation or something that's not right for us, I mean, we're human, right? The emotional element gets us and we have to manage that somehow, right? I'm not criticizing people, but I am calling on people to, as you enter reinvention and you think about this, you take a hard look, an honest look to say, where am I going to get the time and the effort and the energy to do these things? And also, money is such an important element that we have to account for as we're thinking about reinvention. Where are the spots where it's like, you know what? If I've got this cool thing that energizes me, that I am working towards, that I am building, maybe I don't need to do some things that actually are neutral or negative and financial drains. Like maybe I can repurpose some of that discretionary spend and time to this thing that's going to actually not only just light me up and be exciting, but like ultimately is going to create a lot more money and a lot more abundance if you really lean into it and work on it.
I love that, Chris. And the thing is, when I did this years back and I had a coach walk me through tracking my money, I was shocked by how much money I was spending on the unhappiness tax portion. I actually couldn't believe it. And mine was similar. It was like going out with my friends in New York. It was when I was living in the city and, whatever, happy hours, partying, whatever. It was such a wake-up call. It's always a wake-up call when you start to turn your awareness towards what's coming in and what's going out, and then starting to map out, well, how much money is going out that isn't related to the things that I could be doing that excite me, that motivate me, which is why when we talk about reinvention, you're always going to hear me go back to getting clarity and getting a vision and a map of your life that's exciting. Because what I found is that when you have that, like the idea of you becoming a really successful coach and content creator and somebody that's really helping a lot of people cross that bridge between old soul-sucking corporate job and new reinvented exciting careers, that lights you up, right? Like gets you so freaking excited. And that will motivate you naturally to get through the moments and the days and the hours that are hard, where you might even have some pull to go out to happy hour and maybe have a couple of drinks. And not to make anything wrong with that, you can still do that, but it creates fuel when you get clarity and you have a vision and you take on this notion of reinvention. it gives you the fuel to be able to do this type of work, looking at your finances soberly, trying to understand, like, that's why it's so important. I'm actually curious about what your recommendations are about the other side, like the earning potential. How do you start to understand, especially when you're thinking about this idea of reinventing your career? And for a lot of people, this can mean, well, I'm going to start taking what I did before from a corporate setting and think about fractional work, or maybe hanging up a coaching or consulting shingle, or maybe I'm going to launch a digital product, or maybe I want to try something more creative and see where that goes, or whatever it may be, right? Like, people are in those beginning stages of starting to look out onto the horizon thinking, well, what am I going to do for the next 20 or 30 years that can make money? And I love this concept of reinvention because that actually matches up some excitement for me. How do I start to tactically think about earning money as I'm in this process, Chris, right? How do you recommend and coach people to do that? Because I think it's a really important point. Money does need to come in. What are the steps? What are the ways that you think about this?
First, we have to get to a place of unanchoring from that number you happen to make right now, right? And so we talked about that a little bit, but I really want everybody to do as well financially as they can. And so make that number, make 3 times that number eventually, or whatever it is. But a lot of times what people do, I think they conflate these two things. And so it's like, if I'm making 200K right now, okay, so in your reinvented career, how is that going to work? They do this backwards algebraic equation that somehow magically gets back to 200K. And I'm like, but are you looking at the market? Are you looking with clarity at what you're selling and what your services are? I want people to think, again, soberly and intelligently and analytically about, even at the very beginning of your reinvention, because this is really who we're talking to at this moment, put it down on paper what your best estimates are of your potential earnings, right? For whatever it is you're doing. And I'm kind of assuming you're entrepreneurial here, but like, you might be fractional, or you might be a consultant who is working within a corporate system. So you'll have different accuracy and precision of estimates depending on which flavor of reinventor you are. But let's talk about the entrepreneurs, because that's the most unknown in a way. So that's maybe the most difficult case, we'll say. I think a lot of people, again, take the example of me thinking I was going to like make $1 million in my first year, which I'm kind of facetious about. But like, how can you do a little bit of market research at the very beginning when you really are just getting clear on what your potential reinvention paths are? How can you find out what is viable in terms of what would be charged for that service or for that product? If you want to be a coach, can you go find a coach or 2 or 3 that you can inquire from to try to either actually buy their coaching or at least get an understanding of what they charge for coaching? Now you have a couple of data points that you can actually start to think around. And oh, by the way, they're likely experienced, so your price point is probably not going to be their price point to start from, right? That's just one example. I mean, hit ChatGPT, hit Google, hit Reddit. There's a lot of ways to find market data around this so you can sort of understand what the pricing is.
Well, I have a question around this because, like, for example, you can do research on virtually any industry. And you've heard me say this time and time again, that no matter what reinvented career that you're looking out towards, you can find people that are massively successful in that realm, that are really doing it well, that are making a lot of money, and they're probably not as talented as you are at it. Okay, this is just what it is. So when you do the research, you're going to see, wow, I could make $1 billion this year. I don't think there's anything wrong with having that dream exist. I want people to have the big dream in play. I will never, ever squash it. But there's this other element, because we're complex and reinvention is a complex thing, that you go to the other side. And you have this thing when we were preparing for this episode, you said, well, look out into reality about what you could earn doing some of these reinvented pathways. And I want you to have your earning estimates and double the time that you think it's going to take. And I love that, because that's going back to the sobriety thing. And the quick aside to nail this point home, and I really want you all to hear this. This is so important. So I started my career in sales. I was always in sales. And I did really well in sales. And when I first started out, I was somebody that would create ridiculous projections for my sales, right? Like, I'm going to do $1 million this quarter in sales, right? I would do that. And, my managers at the time loved that. They're like, okay, good. This guy is like really proactive. You put a number out, if you reach for the stars, you're going to get to the sun. And that's pretty good, right? That's the whole thing. But what I found is that I would never hit those numbers. And I was constantly disappointed. And that disappointment did create tension, and it created energy for me to succeed. But it also kind of started to wear on me. And at some point, I got a coach, just like you and I, that told me to flip the script. And they said, for a quarter, I want you to do it the opposite. I want you to create really low-level projections. It's like, really? Like, that's not going to motivate me. Like, just trust me. Create low-level projections for your thing and see what happens. And I did that. And I hit the numbers by the first month, right? So I had already hit my numbers. And guess what? I felt so good. I'm like, oh my God, now everything else that I'm doing is cake. Everything else is just icing on the cake. And I felt very free to actually just go out and sell. And I was under no pressure. There was no pressure on me because I'd already hit my numbers really low. So flipping that script is very helpful for me and actually allowed me to sell more. And I was shocked by it. And it changed my whole philosophy. What we're saying here is something similar, which is, yes, create a pie in the sky dream, but have that sit on the shelf for a moment while you come back to reality and understand that reinvention can take some time and create low expectations for yourself. So that way you're moving forward systematically and you're feeling good and you're checking boxes along the way as you're doing this, because that's going to give you the motivation and the confidence to keep going.
That's a great way to say it. Somebody said this in our community yesterday, and this is a great analogy, is it's like, you don't get to 100 push-ups by on day one doing 100 push-ups. You do one push-up, if you haven't done push-ups for a while, it's do one and then jump to 3 and then 5, right? This is that same concept, and it's on both sides, right? It's like, you were earning $300,000. It doesn't mean you need to spend $300,000. So then what do you actually need to spend? Bring that number down. All right. Get that target number down. And then on the earning side, you think you're going to make $1 million because you see some person out there who's no more talented than you are making $1 million. Awesome. Put a pin in that and let's put that 3 or 5 years out or whatever you want to be with that. But now let's look at the reality of there's a lot of stuff you got to do between now and then or here and there. And you need to account for that. Let's have that number. Let's double the amount of time it's going to take you to get there. Honestly, that's really just a rule of thumb at the beginning here. You might even make it smaller than that. The real key is to get to a place where you feel like, hey, I am working towards something sustainably that is going to make me feel good as I am achieving incremental milestones as I go, right? 25K is a great year for my business. Next year, we're going to set it to 37,500 or whatever increment it is.
I want to hop in on this one because when you do what you're saying, which is so wise, and I really hope that you're getting this, like being really smarter on how you're planning, especially this initial stage of your potential reinvention. But what does happen at some point along the way, you will get a moment of, oh my God, should I now go for this harder? Opportunity will start to open up. And that's the moment in reinvention where you start to make different types of decisions, right? Where maybe there is a bigger investment that you need to make because you've seen enough feedback from a market or from the community or the business that you're running where it's like, okay, I need to take this to the next level. This is part of the goal here, right? Is you want to get yourself to a position where you have enough data out there for one or several side hustles or reinvented pathways where you're starting to see, where can I now take this to the next level? Because at some point, you're going to hit that moment where it's like, right, I can now go for this. And that's where you start to see replacement income from your previous career be realistic and further than that. I love what you're saying here. And I think one of your recommendations when you're coaching people is to take that side hustle path, to have a lot of different balls in the fire, especially in the beginning stages of reinvention, and to plan it out soberly so that way you can start to see when you're going to get to that decision point.
Yeah, this is a little do as I say, not as I do, right? I took it pretty far in my career in corporate where I was like pretty burnt out. And I would say, if you're considering reinvention, start exploring and doing the research and the work on your side hustle ASAP, right? Don't hope it goes away. Don't run away from it. Todd, like you opened the conversation here today, it's like you got to lean into this stuff and you got to be honest with yourself and you got to be open with yourself. There's a person that I've been talking to who I really think of as a specific example of this. So I kind of want to think about their situation for a minute because I think it's so illustrative of this. It's that you got to get this on paper. You got to get both sides of this equation on paper and get clarity about it, because I know a person I've been talking to who is so into their reinvention, their side hustle is quickly turning into their main hustle that they're trying to figure out how to get their day job.
They've hit that moment, right?
They've hit that moment. But what they haven't done is the math where they've sat down and sort of soberly gone through with real clarity.
Right.
How much do I need to make in the quote unquote side hustle? Not to get full replacement, because I think that's where we get hung up is it's like, you know, if you're making a couple $100K in your main job, the chances that you're going to get your side hustle all the way up to that, like where are those hours coming from?
Right.
You have to eat and sleep at some point, right? So that's why doing the math and getting this down on paper is so important, because what you can do then is to say, oh, when the side hustle hits, choose a milestone, $35,000 in the first year. Well, then I know that if I drop the main hustle and I invest this time into the side hustle, I can probably turn that into whatever it is, right? There's algebra in there. There's math in there that you should be doing. This is a big fear and uncertainty and stability thing that we were getting way into the nervous system here. But I think people really want to just flip the switch and instantly make the same amount of money that they were making. And it's like, where's that time coming from?
Yeah. There's no fantasy thinking in this. Is one of the big takeaways of this conversation, which is this is a time to look at your finances. I love this notion of looking at your reinvention in terms of milestones and understanding that there's milestones along the way. That's really, really wise. And as you're saying, I'm having so many ideas about how much better I could be doing and we could be doing in our business of really mapping these things out. And look, at the end of the day, reinvention is very related to money, right? Money is one of the main things that drives our behavior. It's how we spend time. We're all here. We need to earn money. We need to eat. This is just the society that we're living in. And going back to the initial premise, it's like, this is an opportunity for you to start matching your money making with your passions, your money making with your interests, your money making with the things that you really care about. What an opportunity. And it's not just easy. Like I said yesterday in our community call, if you don't have butterflies in your stomach, if you don't have nerves in your stomach, you're not reinventing. Right. You're just not. This is a process. This is a journey. And we need to get off of the unhappiness tax pathway of drowning ourselves and distracting ourselves with mind-numbing behaviors because we don't want to deal with the reality. And we're just a stand for and a conduit for, yes, you can do anything that you want in your life. And money's a big part of this. So let's be sober around our money. Let's map it out. Let's do this in milestones. Let's find a community like what we've built to be able to support me in this process. Let me learn to have healthy and open conversations with the people in my life that can help me reinvent. And it's there for you, right? That's why there's a process of reinvention that we stand for that really works. And I think this really is, Chris, just the beginning of conversations around money and how do we deal with money as we're reinventing our careers. There's a lot of different pathways that we can go on, but what we came away with today is just a very clear, hey, understand what's coming in, understand what's going out, start to map out like how much money you're spending on things that actually could be taken off the table, and start to look at how you can invest your time and even your money to reinvent your career. Write it down on paper, right? Like you're a big on paper guy. And I think that's one of the big takeaways here is that get this stuff down. And once you have that ease, you can start to reinvent and you can start to have fun and you can start to have creativity, which is really what this is about. I just love this conversation, man. And this is so good.
Just one more takeaway, right? You can then begin when you have that freeness because you've done that work and you've thought about that and put it down on paper. Now you can begin from zero up with your reinvention and set goals that you can achieve and get excited about and just feel accomplishment on the whole path. Reinvention, it's an adventure. it is an adventure, right? It's iterative. It keeps happening and you feel those butterflies in your stomach, but like, we want this to be the fun roller coaster butterflies, right? You have to do this work. You have to do the paperwork in this case in order to really enjoy the ride.
Yeah, it's a journey. Look, like we're in it ourselves right now. It's not always easy and comforting and everything's in flow. Like you have to go through the process, but this is what great people do. And so we hope that what you got out of this is motivation to reinvent your career and some tactical advice about what you can do with your dollars and your cents to start mapping this out so that way you can give yourself a foundational ease so you can get into an open mind and an excited heart about what your reinvention can look like. That's the whole purpose of this. Make sure that you subscribe here to our podcast, follow us along on social. Like Chris and I are literally a stand for helping people reinvent their careers and their lives. And we have so many different ways to slice and dice this. As always, brother, just so good being with you, but we'll stop here and I can't wait until the next one.